Hello and welcome back to the Dougie Critchley Football YouTube channel, and I have an absolute whopper of a video today. I'll be ranking the chances of every Champions League team taking part in the competition this season. I've got 5 different categories for you. I've got going home, I've got knockouts, I've got could go on a run, I've got semi-finalists and winners, 36 teams to get through. I've got a coffee in hand, let's do this. Okay, I'll be doing this in alphabetical order, and the first team is Ajax. Now, they got knocked out in the last 16 of the Europa League and Conference League in the last 2 seasons. It was a dramatic summer, it was a dramatic end to last season as well. They only won 1 of their final 5 league games. They missed out on the title to PSV by a single point. Francesco Farioli, their former manager, is now in charge of FC Porto. And Johnny Heitinga, who was Arne Slot's assistant last year at Liverpool, has been appointed as their new boss. It was a dramatic summer at Ajax. They lost Joel Hatto, who joined Chelsea. They lost Brian Brobby. Jordan Henderson left. Borna Sosa left for Crystal Palace as well. Jordan Henderson and Borna Sosa, not such key departures. In terms of the incomings, Oscar Gluck arrived from RB Salzburg. He's got a phenomenal record. In the last 2 seasons, he's contributed 14 and 18 league goals for RB Salzburg, but this is a step up. This is a lot more pressure on him. Also, they're calling back Kasper Dolberg, who's been around Europe in the last few years as well. Big pressure on him. Last year, you needed 11 points to qualify for the knockout stages. They do play Qarabag, they play Olympiacos, they play Galatasaray, they also play Chelsea, they play Inter Milan. A real mixed bag of fixtures, but I think they qualify for the knockouts. Just stop right there. Before we go any further, have you subscribed to this channel? If you're enjoying this video, why not like it, leave a comment, and of course subscribe too, guys. Help me out, why not? Next up, let's talk about Arsenal. They had a really solid Champions League campaign last year. They reached the semi-finals for the first time since 2008-09, eventually losing to eventual champions PSG. There was opportunities in that game, particularly from set pieces. That Odegaard save by Donnarumma, that was really phenomenal as well. They had that phenomenal performance against Real Madrid, absolutely blitzing them in the quarterfinals. And it does feel like Arsenal are in a great position to challenge on all fronts this year. Gyokeres, Zubimendi, Eze, these really raise the level of their starting 11. You look at their depth, particularly in defence, with Hincapié, Ben White, players like Lewis Skelly on the bench, Marino, Ethan Nwaneri. It does really feel like this is a squad that is built to challenge on all fronts. I think they've absolutely nailed the draw. Some of their tougher games are at home. Bayern and Atleti, they also play Kairat, the Kazakhstani team, at home as well. They do have to go to Athletic Club. They've got to go to Inter Milan, but I don't think Inter Milan are going to be as good as they were last year in the Champions League. In terms of where Arsenal finish up, I think they reach the semi-finals once again, but I think draw dependent, they've got a chance of reaching the final as well. Do not sleep on Arsenal this year. I can see them going very far indeed. Let's talk about Atalanta next, and they won the Europa League in 2024, of course. Probably the best moment in their history. They then only lost 1 of their 8 group stage games last year in the Champions League. They then drew Club Brugge in the knockout playoff, and unfortunately they lost 5-2. With Talby, who's now gone to Sunderland, scoring a brace, and so much has changed over in Bergamo during the summer. Gasperini has left the club. They signed Ivan Juric, who had such a difficult spell at Southampton and at Roma as their new manager. They've drawn their opening 2 games. They lost Retegui, they lost Ruggeri as well. You really do feel like they need one of Scamacca or Ademola Lookman to have a phenomenal year. We're not quite sure where Ademola Lookman's headspace is going to be at. He was desperate to join Inter Milan. That move unfortunately never materialised. And it does feel like Atalanta are going to really suffer this year as opposed to previous years. I can see them making the knockout stages, but only just, and I think they might get knocked out in the playoff round once again. Next up, let's talk about Athletic Club. Now, they are playing in the Champions League for the first time since 2014-15, but they can take a lot of heart from their Europa League campaign last year, where they reached the semi-finals and unfortunately got absolutely battered by Ruben Amorim's Man United, who were a bit of a joke at that stage. There was a sending off in that tie as well that did prove pretty crucial, but they did really capitulate. Prior to that, though, their home form, at least in the Europa League, had been excellent. They'd beaten sides like Roma, they'd beaten sides like Rangers, they'd gone unbeaten up until the semi-final stage at home. And this year, it does feel like they are in a better position to make a bit of a dent on the Champions League. I wouldn't expect a quarter-final. I wouldn't expect a semi-final necessarily, but in Nico Williams and Oyan Sansa, they've definitely got some players that can cause damage at this level. They've started really well in La Liga. They're 3 out of 3. Only Real Madrid are ahead of them as it stands on goal difference. They do have some really challenging fixtures in this year's group stage though. They've got to play Arsenal, they've got to play Dortmund, they've got to play PSG, they've got to play Newcastle. Do they make the knockouts? I think they do, only just. Real shame that that move for Aymeric Laporte collapsed on deadline day as well. I love a homecoming back to Athletic Club. They didn't get him over the line. I think they've got enough to get into the knockout stages, but potentially no further. Next up, let's talk about Atletico Madrid, and they haven't made it past the quarterfinals of this competition since 2016-17. Last year, they lost in the last 16 stage against Real Madrid on penalties. Do you remember Julian Alvarez with that double kick off that penalty? Really, really cruel exit on their behalf. They played well in that tie. But they invested heavily again this summer. They now spent 370 million euros in the last 3 windows, bringing in a raft of new players. But so far, they haven't really clicked at all in La Liga. Despite playing Elche, Espanyol and Alaves, they've only taken 2 points from their first 3 games. Diego Simeone, the noise around him is starting to grow a little bit more. He's obviously a complete cult hero and club hero there, having taken over in December 2011, that long ago. But is he getting enough from this squad? Is he justifying that most expensive contract in the world out of any manager? I'm not so sure. I think Atletico Madrid make the knockouts, but similar to Athletic Club, no further. Next up, let's talk about Barcelona. Now, they were minutes away from the final last year. Acerbi forced extra time, then Davide Fratesi scored an extra time. They exit, and I would have loved to see that game, PSG versus Barcelona, in the final, especially with the way it developed with Inter Milan really not turning up at all and being absolutely steamrolled by Luis Enrique's side. But Barcelona were so entertaining in that competition last year. They lost 3 times, but when they did win, they generally won big. They scored 28 goals in 8 league games. They were absolutely phenomenal to watch, and it does feel like they've really improved across their side this year, particularly in attacking depth. You look at Marcus Rashford backing up Lewandowski, Ferran Torres still there, Dani Olmo on the bench, Rafinha, Yamal still there, Gavi, Fermin Lopez. They have so many options in forward areas, which is so exciting. Did they make a mistake though selling Inigo Martinez? That is the big question. We need Ronald Araujo to stay fit for this prediction to come true. But at the moment, I have Barcelona as my winners of the entire competition. I know they haven't set La Liga alight just yet, but I do think Hansi Flick football really does create so many attacking opportunities. I think they've got the depth. I think they've got the players. It does slightly rely on Robert Lewandowski staying fit and firing like he did last year, but his performances under Hansi Flick, both for Bayern and Barcelona, have been absolutely immense. And I think this year, Yamal, Rafinha, Lewandowski, but particularly Yamal, fires them to the Champions League, and this would be their first final since 2015. But I'm backing them to get over the line and do it. Right, next up, let's talk about Bayer Leverkusen. Now, as I film this, I have no idea who will be their new manager after they decided to fire Erik ten Hag. The reports coming out of the club actually make that decision look a little bit more sensible. Apparently, he refused to give a pre-match talk before their opening game against Hoffenheim. They obviously drew 3-3 against Werder Bremen in their game prior to the international break as well, having been 3-1 up in that game. And ultimately, Bayer Leverkusen's sporting director and chief executive came to the decision that although it would cost over £4 million to fire Ten Hag, it was a greater risk to keep him. I did feel a little bit sorry for him at the time, given the fact that he'd lost Wirtz, Xhaka, Tar, Frimpong, Radetzky, etc. They brought in a whole load of new players as well. Hincapié left as well. So that was 6 of their 8 most used players from last term. Leverkusen, it's worth remembering, actually had a very solid Champions League campaign last year. They eventually drew Bayern Munich and got absolutely thrashed in a game that Xabi Alonso actually thought got his tactics really wrong, not picking a notable striker or an out-and-out striker in both of those games. But look, this year I think it'll be really difficult for Leverkusen to go that much further. I actually don't see them even qualifying for the knockouts. I think there's been way too much change there. Especially when you factor in that they've got to play PSG, City, Newcastle, Villarreal. That's a really tough run of fixtures. Their final 3 games as well are Newcastle at home, Olympiacos away, and Villarreal at home. I think that's really challenging. Whoever's in charge, best of luck. I do like some of the signings. I like Tillman. I like Ben Seguir in particular. but I think it's going to be really difficult with so much change at that club to qualify for the knockouts. Bayer Leverkusen, early bath. Next up, let's talk about Bayern Munich. And I've seen a lot of people actually be quite hot on Bayern Munich for the Champions League this year, which for me is a little bit rogue. They've actually only reached one semi-final in the last 5 seasons. And you look at their summer business, does it scream to you Champions League challenger? For me, it doesn't. I think Luis Diaz is an interesting signing for the short term, but long term, I think they could have gone for more attractive, more exciting options. A Rafa Leao, a Nico Williams, for example. A Jonathan Tah, Upamecano duo, I think will be really solid in the Bundesliga, but will that be exposed slightly in the Champions League? It's actually a real shame because I think Upamecano has been phenomenal for Bayern in the Bundesliga ever since arriving from RB Leipzig. But in the Champions League, he's really struggled to replicate his best form. Manuel Neuer, do you see him winning a Champions League in 2025? Though without Jamal Musiala for a little bit longer as well. Alphonso Davies too. It just doesn't feel quite ready for me for a challenge. Last year, they lost 3 of their 8 group stage games. They then scraped past Celtic. They beat Leverkusen and then got beaten by Inter Milan, the eventual finalists, of course. They've got a tough run of fixtures to kick off with as well. They played Chelsea, PSG and Arsenal in their first 5 games. It does look like they're actually going to steamroll the Bundesliga, which might help Vincent Kompany with regards to rotation, keeping his players fresh. I see could go in a run for me for Bayern Munich, above knockouts, but not a semi-finalist for me. I think there'll be quarterfinals there or thereabouts. To be honest, by that stage, it really is draw dependent, what your fitness is like within your squad as well. But for me, Bayern Munich won't challenge this year, but they could go on a run to the quarterfinals also. Next up, let's talk about Benfica, and they've made the knockouts in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Last year, they finished 16th in the league phase. They then beat Monaco in a really thrilling knockout playoff and lost to Barcelona 4-1. But Bruno Lage's side have lost a lot of talent during the summer. Angel Di Maria or Concoccio left the club. Florentino Luis was loaned out to Burnley. That feels like a bit of a strange move. And Alvaro Carreras got that dream move to Real Madrid as well. So a lot of change at Benfica. But some of the incomings at Benfica this summer are really, really exciting. Richard Rios has a brilliant reputation with Palmeiras. Dodi Luca Bacchio, they've signed from Sevilla. He was arguably Sevilla's best player last season. Wasn't saying a lot, but is a regular goal scorer and has a lot of experience playing in different leagues as well. Armar Dedic has arrived from RB Salzburg. There's also been Sudakov, who's arrived on loan from Ukraine, and Enzo Berenacea, who shone at Valencia last season, has arrived from Aston Villa on loan as well. There is a lot of pressure on Pavlidis to get the goals, but I like a lot of their players. Trubin in goal, I think, is an excellent goalkeeper. Antonio Silva has slightly fallen out of favour under Bruno Lage, but he's a really high quality centre-back as well. And with Sudakov arriving, with Luka Bacchio, with Pavlidis, I actually think Benfica could go on a run this year in the Champions League. They've definitely got the reputation and recent success in this competition for a club of their stature too. So I'm putting them down as a surprise dark horse for a quarter-final spot. Next up, let's talk about Bodo Glimt. Now, they garnered a lot of attention last year with a run to the Europa League semi-finals before losing to Spurs. Knutsen, their manager, favours a really high-pressing, high entertainment style of play. They scored 28 goals in 16 Europa League games. Last year, they've beaten Celtic, Besiktas, Roma, Lazio in recent seasons, and run Man United close. I don't think they make the knockouts this year, but I bet they pull off a shock. Do not sleep on Bodo Glimt. Very entertaining side. Borussia Dortmund, despite being really inconsistent in the Bundesliga in recent seasons, their Champions League recent record is actually pretty impressive. They reached the final in 2023, pushed Real Madrid really far in that game. They then finished 10th in the group phase last year. They then beat Lille, they beat Sporting CP before losing to Barcelona. But they pushed Barcelona all the way in that quarter-final. They actually beat them 3-1 at home in a super impressive tie. They've proven to be a pretty good cup team. They got to the quarter-finals of the Club World Cup before losing to Real Madrid. I think some of their summer signings, Chukwuemeka, Jude Bellingham, Yan Couto, add so much energy to what was a side that felt like it was going a little bit stale under previous management. Serhou Guirassy nearly hit 40 goals last year and he started the season on absolute fire. They do have a difficult run of fixtures to finish the group phase. They play Villarreal, Spurs and Inter Milan in 3 of their final 4 group games. But I think Dortmund could go on a run. I think they're a very effective side in European competition and in cup competitions, very well organised under Niko Kovac, and I think in Serhou Guirassy they've got an absolute game changer at this level. Next up, let's talk about Chelsea. Now, I've seen a lot of people tip Chelsea to go really far in the Champions League this year, but I think they had a really disappointing end to the transfer window. Levi Colwill being out long term, that's a huge issue. Of course, someone like Cole Palmer will be back soon as well. But Facundo Buonanotte being one of their highlights of the last week of the window, not even making their Champions League squad. The decision to loan out Nicholas Jackson, who might well have been unhappy with being third choice at Chelsea, but they've now got Mark Guiu as their third choice striker. Liam Delap has already picked up an injury. It just feels like they are quite short at centre-back. They don't have a top quality goalkeeper. They look quite thin up front as well. Is this the sort of squad that you see reaching a semi-final? Because I personally don't. I've actually had a bet with Joe Tomlinson, my good old pal Joey T, about who will go further in the Champions League this year between Barcelona and Chelsea. I am 100% backing Barcelona, who have superior depth all across the park and a top quality goalkeeper. But he's backing Chelsea. It does feel a little bit random. They've got some challenging away games as well. They've got to go to Bayern, they've got to go to Napoli, they've got to go to Qarabag and Azerbaijan. They also host Barcelona. Look, I think they reached the knockouts, but for me, no further. I actually think they could be one of the shock early exits of the English sides. Club Brugge have kind of been slept on in the last few years in terms of their European performances. They've reached the Champions League last 16 twice in the last 3 seasons, and the Conference League semi-finals. Last year, they qualified for the knockout phase, they beat Atalanta, then they got beaten by Aston Villa, but it was 1-1 in that first leg until the 82nd minute, and Aston Villa eventually scored 2 late goals, and then they had a red card early on in the second leg. But up until then, Club Brugge had been quietly excellent in that competition. They did lose some key players this summer though. Talby left for my club Sunderland, De Kuyper left for Brighton as well. Florian Wirtz has left for Celta Vigo. These are players that were really solid for them last year, and that's not even mentioning Jashari, who left for Milan as well. So much change, and then a really difficult run of fixtures too. They play Monaco, Atalanta, Bayern and Barca in their first 4 matches in this year's competition. They've been phenomenal for the last few seasons, but I'm afraid Club Brugge, you're going home early. Next up, let's talk about Eintracht Frankfurt. Of course, Europa League winners under Oli Glasner in 2022, but so few players still remain from that time. They lost Ekitike in the summer, but they signed Ritso Douan. They signed Jonathan Burkhardt as well, and Douan in particular has started in really good form. Canuzon as well, watch out for him. A Turkish number 10, he started really brightly as well. And it feels like Ndino Topmöller, along with Sebastian Hoeneß, probably the most exciting emerging coach in German football. They've got a chance. They've started with 2 wins out of 2 in the Bundesliga. Only Bayern Munich and Köln are the only other sides to have a perfect record in the Bundesliga so far. They do have a difficult run of fixtures though. Have a listen to this. They play Atleti, Liverpool, Atalanta, Napoli, Barcelona and Spurs. I think this is going to be a real challenge. Do they pick up enough points to reach the knockouts? I think you need Burkhardt or Douan to do a bit of a madness, but I think they just about do. They've been so organised in recent years. They've replaced players so effectively, always with a plan about how to move forward. I think they make the knockouts just. Next up, let's talk about Copenhagen. Now, they made the Conference League last 16 last year before losing to Chelsea fairly comfortably. They've still got a number of players that you might well recognise. Yusufa Moukoko, former Borussia Dortmund wonderkid. He's only scored 3 goals in 12 games since joining them in the summer. They've still got Thomas Delaney, formerly of Dortmund, formerly of Sevilla. They've got Mohamed El Younousi, who just seems to go on and on. Former Southampton winger at the club. They've won 5 of their 7 league games to date, but they've got a really difficult run of fixtures in the Champions League with Villarreal, Napoli and Barcelona. I'm afraid Copenhagen, no real big impact, you're going home. Next up, let's talk about Galatasaray, and they've started the season on fire. 4 wins out of 4 in the Turkish Super League. They've scored 13 goals. They've conceded just 1. They had a phenomenal summer by Turkish standards. Victor Osimhen, İlkay Gündoğan, Leroy Sané being signed. They've still got Burak Yilmaz. They've got Mario Lemina. They've got Lucas Torreira. This feels like a squad that could potentially go on a little bit of a run. They've got Atleti and Liverpool at home. They've got an absolute bear pit atmosphere there. I actually back Galatasaray as a little bit of a dark horse. In Victor Osimhen, in Mauro Icardi, they've got 2 strikers that can cause any side issues. Victor Osimhen close to 40 goals last year. I'm backing Galatasaray as a cheeky underdog. Next up, let's talk about Inter Milan. Now, they had a pretty phenomenal Champions League campaign last year. They only lost 1 group stage game, which was against Bayer Leverkusen. They then beat Feyenoord, they beat Bayern, they beat Barcelona to reach the final before being humiliated in that final, in that aforementioned final, by PSG. They have had a number of changes over the summer, trying to freshen up that squad a little bit. Luis Enrique was signed from Marseille. Boni from Parma. They brought in Sucic as well from Dinamo Zagreb. They haven't really lost anyone that important except for Benjamin Pavard, but they signed Manuel Akanji. So far in the league, they beat Torino, absolutely thrashed them, but then lost to Udinese. It seems really, really even in Serie A right now. I just don't think Inter have got enough energy and freshness in that side to go deep in the Champions League once again, especially under a manager in Christian Kivu who's never managed in the competition. I think they'll make the knockouts, but no further for me. Next up, let's talk about Juventus now. They haven't made it past the last 16 stage since 2018-19. Last year, they made the knockout stages, lost to PSV in really dramatic fashion after extra time. Even Perisic, former Inter Milan player, was absolutely crucial in that tie. That would have been really, really painful. But I do think Juve had a really positive end to the window. Bremer being back fit, massive help for them. They also signed Lois Openda. They made Francisco Conceição's loan move permanent. Edin Zergrova arrived from Lille. Jonathan David arrived on a free. It does feel like Igor Tudor now has a number of attacking options, with Dusan Vlahovic also starting the season really, really positively from the bench to make an impact in this year's competition. I actually have Juve down as could go on a run. More than the knockouts, I really don't think we should underestimate that forward depth they've got. Yes, there's new players to gel, but do not underestimate them. I think Juve could be back, so to speak, in the Champions League this year. Next up, let's talk about FC Qarabag, the Kazakh side from Almaty, who beat Slovan Bratislava, who beat Celtic on penalties to get to this stage. Now, the crucial thing for them is who do they play at home. It is a 9-hour, 15-minute flight from London to Almaty. Arsenal will be absolutely delighted that they are playing them at home. Real Madrid, though, visit the Kazakh capital, of course. They also play Inter Milan and Arsenal, as I say, in this group stage. Their key player is called Dastan Satpayev, who just turned 17. He's actually already agreed to sign for Chelsea next summer when he turns 18, next August in 2026. He's 5'9", diminutive forward for Kairat, but he scored 10 goals and got 8 assists last season for FC Kairat. Keep an eye on him, but I'm afraid, what a story for FC Kairat, but they are not going through to the knockout stages. They'll be going home early. Now, Liverpool's recent Champions League history isn't great, actually, for a club of their stature. They reached the final, of course, in 2022, lost to Real Madrid. Since then, they've gone last 16, didn't qualify, last 16. And actually last year was a bit of a disappointment in terms of an amazing league campaign. They won 7 out of 8 league games, despite having a really, really difficult draw for the league phase. But they then lost to PSG on penalties in the last 16. It was pretty cruel to draw PSG, given how they performed in the league phase. But they got absolutely demolished in a 1-0 win, if that even makes sense, at the Parc des Princes. PSG had 27 shots with 10 on target. Liverpool had 2 and 1 on target. Harvey Elliott's goal, their only shot on target. PSG had over 70% possession. It was absolutely nuts. And of course, the big story is Liverpool's spending this summer, spending more than any other English side in history in terms of outward spending, not in terms of net spend, but in Isak, in Wirtz, in Frimpong, in Gyokeres, in Ekitike. Huge changes there. None of those players that they brought in, interestingly, have that much Champions League experience. Florian Wirtz's first year in the Champions League last year went really, really well. He scored 6 in 9 Champions League games, but Alexander Isak doesn't have the best Champions League record. He's only ever scored 1 goal in the competition. Ekitike, new to the competition too. Frimpong, not that much experience, so it'll be fascinating to see how those new signings do. Again, similarly to last year, they've got a really difficult set of fixtures. They've got to play Real Madrid at home, but they've got to go away to Inter. They've got to go away to Eintracht Frankfurt, to Galatasaray, to Marseille. That is really, really difficult. Obviously, injuries dependent. I do think their starting 11, their best 13, 14, 15 players, really, really strong in most positions. But a lot of it will come down to the fitness of Van Dijk. A lot of it will come down to the fitness of Ryan Gravenberch and Alexis McAllister too. At the moment, I have them down as semi-finalists, which on the basis of how they performed last year, they'll absolutely take that. I think a semi-final. They'll really be going for back-to-back league wins for the first time in their Premier League history, of course. I just don't think they've got enough to reach the final as it stands right now, but I could easily be proven wrong. It just feels like there's too many new fits and new parts of that forward line to necessarily guarantee them a final, but I'll go for a semi-final for Liverpool. Now, Man City are in the midst of a huge rebuild. I tweeted it last week, but 13 of their 23-man squad for the 2023 final against Inter Milan have now left the club, with the likes of Ederson, Akanji, Grealish, De Bruyne, Gundogan, all departing this summer, joining the likes of Julian Alvarez and Riyad Mahrez and players like that. It does feel like there's been so much change at Man City. Last year, they lost 3 group stage games. They only scraped through to the knockout stages. They then lost to Real Madrid 6-3 on aggregate, who only just got past Atleti and then got thrashed by Arsenal, which doesn't suggest to me that they're in the best space for a deep Champions League run this year. I think they do look fairly short of goals. Do we see Doku, Savio, Marmoush stepping up and filling the void and getting back to the levels where they had Sane and Sterling and Foden at his best as well? He's struggled so far with his fitness this campaign. John Stones has been out. Cherky's out for the next couple of months as well. Rodri getting back to his best. I think Man City make the knockouts, but I just really don't feel very sure on them going any further than that as it stands. They've already lost 2 of their opening 3 league games for the first time since 2004-05. I think they look a little bit short of goals. I think it'll take a while for these new players to mesh. So I'm going knockouts for Man City at the moment. Marseille next, Roberto De Zerbi's Marseille. Now they had an absolutely crazy summer. Jonathan Rowe, Rabiot had to depart after having a fight. Luis Enrique joined Inter Milan, but their incomings really fascinating. Aubameyang's back at the club. Benjamin Pavard coming on loan. Timothy Weah coming in on loan. Angel Gomez signed on a free. They made Pierre-Emile Højbjerg's loan move permanent as well. They also just feel like they've got a really nice blend of centre-backs now with Medina and Pavard at the back. That feels really, really solid. But having said that, I think there's been far too much change at Marseille to challenge on both fronts. They finished second in Liga last year, but they weren't playing any European football, and it really, really did help them down the stretch. They've got to play Real Madrid away, Newcastle and Liverpool at home. One of the shocks of the video so far, but I don't have Marseille reaching the knockouts. I think there's just too much blending needed there, and 11 points from that run of fixtures, it looks challenging. Next up, let's stay in France and talk about Monaco. Now they had a pretty crazy summer as well. Brillon Bolo departed the club, as did Ben Seguir, as did Singo, but their incomings really, really fascinating. Eric Dyer, Paul Pogba, Ansu Fati, Radetzky. This is really, really exciting levels of experience joining the club. It does feel like you need either one of Mika Biereth or Florian Balogun to absolutely bang for them to have any chance of making the knockout stages. But it should be a very watchable side as well if Pogba gets back to anywhere close to his best. Akliouche, fantastic player to watch. I still love Golovin as well in that attacking midfield zone. Their first 3 games are against Galatasaray, Real Madrid and Juventus, which could leave them in a tricky position, especially because given their final 3 games are against Club Brugge, Man City and Spurs. But I've got a sneaky feeling about Monaco. I do feel like Adi Hütter really organises his sides really effectively in European competition. I think they'll make the knockouts. Maybe only just. Next up, let's talk about Antonio Conte and his Napoli side. Conte has a terrible Champions League record. It's widely talked about for a reason. He's only ever won 15 of 42 Champions League games. His points per game in the Champions League is 1.4. In the Premier League, it's 2 points per game. In Serie A, 2.3. However, they were helped last season, of course, by the fact that they didn't have any European football after finishing 10th the year before, eventually won the title, narrowly ahead of Inter Milan. But they have built a squad that should be able to challenge on more fronts this season. Bucamo arriving, Milinkovic-Savic on loan from Torino with an obligation to buy, De Bruyne, Luka, Noah Lang, Højlund. This feels like a squad that should be able to challenge on multiple fronts this season. This feels counterproductive because he's only ever reached 1 quarter-final in his entire managerial career. He never even got out of the groups with Inter Milan. He wasn't playing in the Champions League last year with Napoli. But I do just have a feeling that they could go on a run this year. I really do feel like they should be aiming for a quarter-final this year, this Napoli side. It does feel like a really tight Serie A battle this year, but they've got off to a solid start, if leaving a little bit late. I think Napoli could go on a run. Next up, let's talk about Newcastle. They were one of the topics of the summer with Isak's future, with Voltemada arriving, Alanga, Wissa, Ramsey, Ramsdale, Malik Thiaw. I actually think they finished in a pretty reasonable position, but a few years ago, they really struggled to balance the Champions League and the Premier League. I feel that they've got a much better squad to do that this year. I think they'll reach the knockouts, but they do have a difficult set of fixtures, so get a load of this. They play Barca, Benfica, Athletic Club and PSV at home. They've got away games against PSG, Marseille and Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer Leverkusen should be a lot more simple, but Marseille is an away game. That is absolutely massive. PSG 2. I think they make the knockouts, but I don't think they go much further, and I honestly think Eddie Howe should take that this year. Next up, let's talk about Olympiacos. Now, they won the Conference League in 2024. They reached the last 16 of the Europa League last year. They went unbeaten at home. They eventually finished 7th in the group phase before losing to Bodo Glimt. Away from home was the real damage in that tie. And Daniel Podence has arrived back at Olympiacos this summer. But the big talking point is the arrival of Mehdi Taremi. Now, he never really got too much of an opportunity at Inter Milan behind Lautaro Martinez and Marcus Thuram. But this is a player at FC Porto who scored against Atletico Madrid. He scored against Liverpool, Chelsea, Juventus. If he can get going, deep into his 30s now, maybe they've got a chance. They do have a difficult run of fixtures though. I am excited to see Trefezzo, who they've signed from Como, who ended up with 10 league goals and assists last year, but they do have to play Arsenal, they've got to play Barcelona, they've got to play Real Madrid. Olympiacos and Jose Luis Mendilibar, I'm afraid, early exit. Next up, let's talk about the holders PSG. Now, everyone knows how difficult it is to win back-to-back titles. Since Milan won back-to-back titles in 1989 and 1990, the only side to win consecutive titles is Real Madrid, who of course did that famous three-peat between 2016 and 2018. It's even difficult to reach consecutive finals. Liverpool did it in 2018 and 2019, Bayern did it in 2012 and 2013, and Juve did it in 97 and 98. But that shows just how difficult it is to go back-to-back in terms of finals. PSG were phenomenal last year. They won 48 of 65 games in all competitions. They then reached the Club World Cup final, but they are already feeling the effects of that competition. They didn't have a pre-season. They've gone straight into this campaign. Fabian Ruiz, Desiree Doué, Ousmane Dembele have already picked up injuries. I just think it's going to be really difficult for them to basically play for 2 years straight and reach another Champions League final. For me, they could go on a run, they'll definitely make the knockouts, but they won't go too much further than that. And given their run of games that they've got in this year's competition, I think Luis Enrique would absolutely take that. I know he'll have ambitions of going back to back, but listen to this fixture list. So they play Atalanta, Barcelona, Leverkusen, Bayern, Spurs, Athletic Club, Sporting CP and Newcastle. That might be the hardest draw out of any side, and when you're going into this year's competition without having really taken a break, without having really played a pre-season, I think that's going to be really difficult to go too much further than the knockouts. Next up, let's talk about PSV, who had an absolutely mental season last year. They won 13 of their opening 15 league games. They could then barely win a game for the next 7 weeks or so, but they finished the season by taking 27 points out of a possible 30 and pipping Ajax to the title by a single point. They reached the Champions League knockouts last year. They knocked out Juventus. They then got absolutely thrashed by Arsenal, losing 7-1 at home to an Arsenal side that had Timber on the score sheet, I seem to remember. Odegaard, Calafiori, a number of stars really turned up for Arsenal in that game. It was probably their most attacking, free-flowing performance of the entire season. And this summer, PSV got absolutely pillaged of their top talent. Noah Lang, Bakayoko, Luke de Jong left, Buscagli, Walter Benitez. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to replicate last year in terms of a Champions League run. I think they're going home. Next up, let's talk about Pafos, and this is just their second year in European competition for the Cypriot club. They reached the last 16 of the Conference League last year before losing to Djurgården, the Swedish side Djurgården. They have signed David Luiz over the summer, but I think it's going to be really, really difficult for Pafos. Massive achievement to get to this stage, but I'm afraid they're going home. Similar story with Qarabag, I'm afraid. They're in the Europa League last year and won 1 out of 8 games. Their fixtures this year, really, really horrible. Athletic Club, Chelsea, Ajax, Napoli, Frankfurt, Liverpool, all in their final 6 games. They spent 900,000 euros on transfers in the summer. I'm afraid that's just not going to be enough for a Champions League run. Qarabag and Pafos, thank you for coming, but you'll be going home early. Next up, let's talk about Real Madrid. Now, for the first time since 2019-20, they didn't reach the semi-finals last year, of course, being thrashed by Arsenal, losing 3-0 in that opening leg and 2-1 at home as well. 5-1 to Arsenal. Really, really embarrassing stuff from Real Madrid last year. It wasn't a great campaign, but there were reasons for that. Ancelotti feels like he'd got to the end of his tether at Real Madrid. Amazing tenure there. They could barely keep a single defender fit. Carvajal and Alaba and Militao missed so many minutes, and I think they've started the season in much better form. They look really, really solid. The relationship between Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. looks so much better. They've got really good depth now with Hausen and Mastantuono arriving and making an impact already. Arda Güler started the season in great form too. So whilst last year they lost 3 group stage games against Lille and Milan and Liverpool, and then beat Man City in that knockout playoff 6-3, scraped past Atletico Madrid and then lost to Arsenal in that quarter-final. A really fairly solid achievement given the fact they played so badly in that Champions League that whole campaign. I think they go further this year. I think they go back on track. I can't quite see them making a final. But I think I'll go with a semi-final exit for Real Madrid. Next up, let's talk about Slavia Prague. Now, they only won one of their 8 Europa League games last year. They have beaten Roma and Lille and Union Saint-Gilloise at home in the last few seasons in European competition. That's where they're going to have to pick up their points. They lost Malik Diouf in the summer, who was a key part of their attack going forward. Slavia Prague, similar to Pafos, similar to Qarabag, I can't see you going through to the knockout stages. Next up, let's talk about Sporting CP, who are on to their second coach, Rui Borges, since that departure of Ruben Amorim last November. They also had some huge departures in the summer, the likes of Gyokeres, Conrad Harder, who's being lined up as his long-term replacement, Dario Sugo as well, going to Chelsea. It doesn't feel like they've strengthened enough and replicated those exits to go deep in this year's competition. I find it really difficult to imagine them going very far at all. They lost against FC Porto just before the international break. I think they'll be in the top 3 in Portugal, but they're not going through to the knockouts of the Champions League. Next up, let's talk about Spurs. Now, of course, they're in this competition as Europa League champions, not through their league finish, of course, finishing 17th. Massive respect, getting over the line, winning their first trophy since 2008 last year, and I do think they've strengthened really effectively. I really like their forward options this year. With Xavi Simons, with Kudus, with Kolomwani arriving, it does feel like they've got the players when Maddison's back fit, when Kulusevski's back fit, to really trouble teams and make an impact off the bench as well. They look far more solid defensively. I think João Palhinha is an excellent addition in the centre of the park as well. I actually think Spurs could go quite far. They don't have brilliant Champions League pedigree. They haven't made the knockouts since 22-23 when they lost to Milan in a really limp display. The previous time before that, they lost to Leipzig in 2019-20 in the knockout phases, 4-0. Look, there's the weight of history against them, but I almost think they'll see this as a bit of a free hit. They weren't really supposed to be in this competition. They're only here through winning the Europa League. They do have a difficult run of fixtures, of course. 3 of their final 4 games are against PSG, Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen, but I think Spurs make the knockouts, and I think they make the knockouts fairly comfortably. Next up, let's talk about Union Saint-Gilloise, who finished 21st in the Europa League group stage last year. They were then knocked out by Ajax. They lost some key players in the summer, with Ivanovic joining Benfica. Amura made that move to Wolfsburg permanent, and Noah Sadiki, so much energy, so much quality in the middle of the park, joined my club Sunderland too. I think it'll be really difficult for them this year. I don't see them going much further. Watch out for a couple of key players. They do have Sofiane Boufal, formerly of Southampton, who hasn't really lit it up in Belgium just yet. And Promise David, the Nigerian forward, definitely worth keeping an eye on, but I'm afraid they won't have enough. They'll be going home in the group phase. Next up, let's talk about Villarreal, who have gone off like a rocket in La Liga. Only Real Madrid and Athletic Club have picked up more than their 7 points from their opening 3 games. They had a really positive end to the window as well, with Georges Mikatadze signing from Lyon, a player I wanted to join my club Sunderland. Renato Vega is there as well. They did lose key players in Alex Baena and Jeremy Pino and Tiano Barry, but they got pretty good fees for them as well. I think Marcelino will probably struggle to keep this squad challenging on multiple fronts this year, so I do actually see them struggling in the Champions League, but I think they can be expected to finish in the top 6 of La Liga. They do have Spurs, Juve and Man City in their first 3 games, which will be a real test. They do finish with Copenhagen, Ajax and Leverkusen, so if they are in with a shout, they could really pick up some points late on in the competition, but at the moment, I've got them going home. So guys, that's it. That's my Champions League predictions for this season. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you smash that like button, comment down below with your predictions as well. My final 4 are Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool and Arsenal. I think Liverpool and Real Madrid are less likely to make the final than Arsenal and Barcelona. Arsenal's depth is just really impressing me at the start of this season. I think Barcelona are the favourites to go and win it for the first time since 2015, but do not sleep on Mikel Arteta's side. I know they haven't got over the line in big competitions in the last few years, but I am backing them this year to reach the final. If you have enjoyed this video, guys, please like it, leave a comment with your own predictions, your own thoughts, and thank you so much for watching this video. I will catch you next time.